earlier today, there was an article that came out from Packers reporter Rob Demovsky for ESPN, and he shared some interesting information about these players, some of these Packers defenders, and some quotes on Jeff Hafley. And with Jeff Hafley coming in this offseason, we still have not seen, of course, a regular season game because we are still a few weeks away from that. But so far, it seems that there's lots of positive things coming out about Jeff Hafley and how these players view him. But I want to show you a few specific things here, and I'll leave the full article linked down below. But here it is from Rob Demovsky. It was February 12th, the day after Super Bowl Sunday, and the first day Hafley officially started on the job with the Green Bay Packers. Alexander says, the first day he came in, I was in his office, said Alexander, the Packers' two-time All-Pro cornerback. I talked to all the coaches. From day one, Alexander came away optimistic. He was very open to suggestions, ideas from me, which a lot of coaches don't want to hear sometimes, Alexander recalled, and I just knew from that point we're going to have something. And I think that it's very important to have buy-in from your players, whether you're the offensive coordinator or the defensive coordinator. And I think that there were times that in Joe Barry's time here in Green Bay as the defensive coordinator that I did question some of the buy-in from the players with Joe Barry's scheme and how he liked to operate. It didn't seem like they were necessarily always on the same page. It wasn't necessarily all the time, but there were some moments where it seemed that way. But here with Jair, the fact that he does seem to trust Hafley and Hafley is open to suggestions, I think that can create a atmosphere in the locker room and among the defensive players where they trust Hafley and want to play for him. And I think having a guy that players are really willing to go out there and play for is important. And then Rob Demovsky continues, 6 months and an offseason worth of meetings, film sessions, workouts, and practices later, Alexander feels the same way, even if he can't know for sure whether that's the annual preseason optimism talking or an actual solution to the defensive issues that have held the Packers back at times. And it's very true that at this time in the preseason, training camp time, so many teams are optimistic because, there hasn't been anything really that's come out negative when it comes to, actual game situations. Because training camp, you can sort of say, well, how do we know if that's what's really going to translate into the season? Because lots of times I would say in camp, you see some things take place that maybe carry on to the season, but there's so many situations where a quarterback struggles, then he has a fine season. So you can't really take a ton out of training camp when it comes to how a team's going to be in the regular season. You can take a little bit, but not a ton. And so there is a lot of optimism now among many teams. And if you saw recently, Nick Wright picked the Chicago Bears to win the Super Bowl. And so clearly there's a lot of, I would say, maybe unwarranted optimism, maybe when it comes to the Bears winning or making it to a Super Bowl. But anyways, let's continue here. Rob Demovsky, he shares from Kenny Clark. I think it's going to be huge, man, Clark said. This is going to allow me to really show my talents, and I think it's just going to be a really good thing. It fits me. It fits how I like to play. It fits my mentality and my mindset, and I'm excited to see what I can do in this system. And that is Kenny Clark referring to going from a 3-4 to a 4-3 defense. And lots of other things in the past have made it pretty clear that, instead of having to, as a defensive lineman, having to sort of keep an eye on two gaps in the offensive line, they just get to shoot through one gap, which would make them, mean they're moving much quicker, not having to think as much, and being able to be much more disruptive and explosive. So Kenny Clark seems to be pretty excited about what it's going to do for him in this defense. And then the biggest difference for Gary and fellow edge rushers Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness, and Kinsley Anibari in Hafley's system, hand in the dirt and not dropping back, Gary said. That's simple. Gary said he and his fellow defensive ends feel more explosive coming out of a three-point stance. And so I think at this point, I wouldn't expect to see, negative comments coming out from these Packers defenders about Jeff Hafley. Not Joe Hafley, that's Joe Barry. We're talking Jeff Hafley these days. But at the same time, these guys are giving a lot of high praise to what they're doing, what Hafley is doing, how they relate to him. So just from reading what's going on right now, it sounds like the players are really bought into what's happening here, and they seem more excited in this scheme, in my opinion, and we'll see if that continues once the regular season actually comes around. Then here's a quote from rookie Evan Williams. He says, a lot of it just comes down to them explaining it. I mean, they're just coaching truthfully, Williams said, just how well Coach Haff explains the why behind certain coverages. It just makes the information a lot more sticky. If you know what we're calling a call for or what we're looking for in certain calls. So yeah, I guess us rookies have been able to pick up pretty quickly and be playmakers out there. And that's exactly one of the reasons that was brought up a ton just from Matt LaFleur, other coaches, the reason for bringing in Jeff Hafley, and it's his ability to take these complex schemes and explain them in the way that is very simple and allows players to go out there and play and not have to think a ton. And so the fact that we keep seeing that theme come up, it was talked about when he got signed, and then you wonder, okay, is that going to translate into coaching the Packers in the NFL? And just from some of these quotes, especially this quote from Evan Williams, you see that, yes, it seems to be that the way that he's explaining things, even to rookies, is allowing them to come out and play really well. Because Evan Williams has had a good amount of interceptions during this training camp, and he is a rookie. And so it seems that what Hafley is doing and the way he's coaching is really working. Then here's a quote that I had shared in the past couple of weeks from Love, but I'll share that again about the defense that Rob Demovsky also shares. I think it was from a Love press conference at some point. But Love said, I think the defense has done a great job of mixing up looks. Love said, they never really give you the same two looks back to back. They do a great job of mixing it up. The safeties are always moving, and they make stuff all look the same with their pressures, with their disguise. They'll show pressure, drop out. So it's really a mind game for the quarterback trying to tell what they're in. And I think right now they're doing a great job of being able to pass stuff off and kind of understanding where they need to be in the zones and the man and communicating well with each other. So there's been a ton of positive information coming out about this defense. And once the season starts, I don't expect everything to be perfect. This is a new defensive scheme, and sometimes it takes time to get things figured out once the regular season actually starts. So I'm willing to have patience with whatever this defense happens to look like once the season starts. And once the season starts, of course, there's going to be some weaknesses that are probably exposed and things the Packers have to figure out how to do better. But up to this point, there's just a lot of positives coming out about Jeff Hafley, which is, I think, a good sign at this point in the preseason and training camp. But that's all for today. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below. You can follow me on Twitter, LukeBeller3, and I'll see you guys next time.